I realized then that the demons were no longer behind the walls. They were now with me every moment, a part of my day, a part of me. I had no idea that when I opened that hidden door in my grandparents' house, I was opening another door, a door to the depths of darkness that I had never imagined existed in such terrifying ways. My home, where I had lived my entire childhood, looked like any other house on the outside, old walls cracked with age, and a wooden roof creaked with every wind. But behind those walls, another world lay lurking, waiting for the moment when I would weaken enough to reach out and uncover its secrets. The cellar I had entered last night wasn't just a place where magical tools or remnants of ancient rituals were stored, as I had suspected. Rather, it was more like a temple to demons, an underground kingdom teeming with wandering spirits. The walls were covered in symbols engraved with dried blood, cracked as if they were still bleeding despite the passage of centuries. Some of them I didn't understand, and some I felt I'd read before in the secret manuscripts I'd inherited from my father, but I'd always avoided reading them carefully for fear of opening a door I couldn't close. As for the floor, it was painted with interlocking black circles, intricate geometric shapes of charcoal and ash, intersecting with other smaller circles surrounded by the remains of burnt animal bones, like keys locked to other worlds. I advanced hesitantly, the air in that basement so heavy it almost suffocated my chest. Every breath I took came out hot and returned icy cold, as if the place was gradually stealing my warmth. Suddenly, I heard whispers coming from deep within, whispers whose language I didn't understand, but they weren't just passing words, messages implanted directly in my mind, without passing through my ears. They whispered to me slowly. "You are one of us, and you are not one of them. Your blood is our blood, and your voice is our voice." I shuddered as I covered my ears, trying to banish those words, but they became clearer the more I tried to ignore them. Nevertheless, I continued walking until I stood before an old wooden table, weathered at the edges and covered in dust, as if it hadn't been touched for hundreds of years. On top of it lay a huge book covered in iron chains, chains twisted like snakes, violently entwining them. I reached out and touched the chains, and they suddenly trembled, making a faint metallic sound as if they were breathing. A chill ran through my skin, and I quickly withdrew my hand, but curiosity, or perhaps a curse, prompted me to try again. When I placed my hand again on the cover, the chains suddenly shuddered and then opened automatically, as if recognizing me as the rightful heir to this cursed legacy. I slowly opened the book, and the first pages were written not in ink, but in dark, congealed blood, the scent of which still lingered in the air. It was filled with drawings and symbols, some familiar, some I'd never seen before. What terrified me most, however, was the fact that I found my family name engraved in bold letters on the first page, Rock's lineage. Underneath this name was a long list of my ancestors, each bound by a covenant with a different demon. Every time I ran my fingers over a name, I felt a sudden headache and a vague image flashed through my mind: bloody rituals, human sacrifices, red flames, and muffled screams. At that moment, I felt the ground shake beneath me, as if the entire vault had begun to pulsate with life. Suddenly, I heard a deafening scream, but it didn't come from outside. It came from within me, from deep within my head, as if it had split my skull in two. "You will not escape, you will not emerge, you are destined to complete what your ancestors began." I fell to my knees, covering my ears with my hands, but the screaming didn't stop. It grew louder and louder until I felt my eyes might burst from the pressure. In an instant, all the candles illuminating the basement went out, and I was plunged into a deep, pitch-black darkness. It wasn't just any darkness, it was a living being coiled around me and swallowed me up. Out of the blackness, I began to see glowing red eyes. It wasn't just one eye, but dozens, then hundreds, surrounding me on all sides. They had no body, just blazing gazes piercing me from deep within. I felt those eyes knew me, memorized my name, memorized my blood, and awaited my command. Amidst this ring of darkness, I heard a single voice, deeper than all else, a voice that made my bones tremble. "You are not our master yet, but you will be. Those eyes drew near, swirling around me like a whirlpool, and I shivered like a child caught in a storm. Yet I felt a strange power pulsing in my blood, a power I had never known before, as if something had awakened within me. I no longer knew whether to resist, or whether to surrender. Before my consciousness completely collapsed, I heard one last sentence that made my soul tremble. The next chapter will begin, when you choose, to become one of us, or for us to tear your soul apart. Then darkness fell again, and I fell into a bottomless abyss. I never thought I'd reach this level of certainty mixed with terror, where everything around me was subject to dark interpretations linked to the demons I inherited with my blood. I thought I was just a sorcerer, an extension of an ancient lineage of forbidden practices, but the truth was even more sinister. My very blood carried an eternal curse that bound me to their world, without even uttering a single spell. That night, as I watched the moon from my window, I felt a cold current permeate my body. It wasn't just an ordinary cold, it was something penetrating deep within me, awakening hidden cells and making them tremble. Suddenly, I heard the familiar whispers, but this time they were closer than ever, as if they were coming from within me, emerging from my blood, caressing my mind with a terrifying lightness. A hoarse voice said, as if it had emerged from within my bones, "Rock, you no longer need us. We are in your blood, feeding on your pulse, growing with your breath." My being trembled, and I remembered what my father had said one day as he recounted his final instructions to me. "Don't delve too deeply into our ancient books, because if you find the truth, you will lose control of yourself." But I had found the truth, or rather, the truth had found me. I began to notice that when I became angry or terrified, my features would change for brief moments, my eyes darkening, and my facial features would distort as if something were trying to escape from within me. Each time this happened, the demons would laugh softly inside me, mocking my weakness, as if to say, "You were not born to be your own master, you are just a vessel." One evening, while searching through my grandfather's papers, I found a book covered in layers of dust, one that no one before me had dared to open. It bore a strange title, The Cursed Blood Covenant. With every page I turned, I felt as if the air around me grew heavier, and the letters of the book recited themselves in a voice I could not hear with my ears, but directly with my mind. I became increasingly certain that I was merely a link in a long chain of victims. Each generation of my family believed it was in control, when in reality, it was merely a vessel for evil to perpetuate itself. The most dangerous thing I read in that book was a phrase written in thick black script, stretching across the page like a living being. "Whoever attempts to break the covenant, their blood will flow before they can speak its name." I trembled and found myself placing my hand on my chest, as if my heart had become a vessel for what the book was saying, beating so loudly that the walls could barely hear it. I realized that my repentance would not be just a decision, but a battle with a legacy that had resided within me for generations, a battle against merciless blood and against forces too powerful to be resisted by hope alone. Yet there was a glimmer of hope, faint but present. On the last page, I found a cryptic reference to the lost key, an ancient symbol capable of severing the bond between blood and demons. The book didn't explain much, but it mentioned a distant place deep in the mountains where the secret lay hidden. I felt a chill run deep within me, along with a sense of dread and excitement at the same time, as if the world were waiting for me to dare to take that journey. I closed the book and placed my hand on my chest, my heart pounding unnaturally, as if something inside me rejected the idea. Then I heard an inner scream shake my head. "You will not escape, we are you, and you are us." I smiled with a sneer mixed with despair, and whispered to myself, "But I will try, even if it costs me my own blood." At that moment, I felt the air around me grow heavier, as if the walls were closing in on me. The whispers of the demons grew clearer, calling my names, touching my memories, reminding me of every moment of weakness I'd experienced, every fear I'd tried to hide from myself. I knew the path ahead was no longer an ordinary road, but a dark tunnel with no return, where each step required me to confront myself before confronting any external being. And so began the first step in a struggle not just against the demons, but against a curse running through my veins, against a legacy that wanted to swallow me whole, against a self I no longer recognized. All I could do was move forward, knowing that every moment of weakness could cost me my life, and that every faint laugh in the dark was a reminder that I was no longer alone, but rather, we were all inside this body, two souls, or more, vying for control. I thought I'd reached the bottom of the abyss, that nothing remained to astonish or terrify me after everything I'd been through. But I was wrong, madly wrong. That night, as I returned to my room, trying to gather the remnants of my soul, drowsiness overcame me, and I fell into a deep sleep. It wasn't a peaceful sleep, it was another gateway to a world I'd never imagined. I found myself standing in a dark corridor, its walls built of damp stones, dripping with cold water like ancient blood dripping from the ceiling. The corridor was endlessly long, and at the end of it, I could see doors stacked together. Each door was engraved with a strange symbol resembling the talismans I'd inherited from my father and grandfather. Some of these symbols moved lightly, as if the stones themselves were breathing. I approached the first door. It was engraved with a demon's head with two long horns, one of which extended like a tongue of flame. I reached out to open it, and a gruff voice whispered in my ear, "Don't touch it, not yet." I stepped back, my heart nearly leaping out of my chest. I looked around, but saw no one, but a deep sense of surveillance gripped me, as if my every move had been monitored since the moment of my birth. I walked toward the second door, where I found a carving of a huge eye staring at me. The closer I got to it, the more I felt my body freeze, a mysterious force simultaneously pulling me forward and backward. Then, the door opened by itself, as if it knew I was its heir. Behind it, I saw a scene I've never forgotten, a dark hall, its ceiling suspended by iron chains, and the floor paved with small bones. Among them were burning candles, reflecting a weak light onto the faces of the gathered demons. They were diverse beings, some with human features but empty black eyes, others distorted and without any definite shape, their shadows writhing as if alive. They were gathered around a massive stone throne, upon which sat a formidable, mysterious entity, seemingly the embodiment of darkness itself. Its body was covered in freely moving shadows, and its eyes, like two glowing embers, watched me deeply. The entity raised its head toward me and said in a deep voice that shook the place until the chains trembled, "Finally, the heir to the lineage has arrived." I felt a chill run through my veins. I couldn't move, I couldn't even scream. There was something that connected me to the place, something that made me a part of it, as if my body had become a link in an unbreakable chain. The entity continued, its voice echoing through the walls. "You don't yet know the value of the blood that runs through your veins. Your ancestors made covenants with us hundreds of years ago. Each one took their share, and now it's your turn. You cannot escape this legacy." I shouted at it, trying to summon my tattered courage. "I will not be your slave. I saw what my father and grandfather did to you, and I saw the devastation you brought upon our lives. I will not repeat their mistake." The entity laughed a deafening laugh, shaking the entire place. Even the chains hanging on the floor began to swing violently, as if they were fingers trying to grab me. "No one chooses, Rock. We choose. As for you, you were born sealed with our seal." Suddenly, the hall went dark, and I fell into an endless, dark void. Everything went black, except for the sound of my heart, which echoed in my ears like war drums. I felt completely lost, torn between reality and a dream, until I almost lost my sense of self. I woke up panting, sweat drenched my face and body. Dawn was about to break, but I found no relief. I felt that what I had seen was not just a dream, but a message from the world that was now stalking me. I spent all day searching for any clue, rummaging through ancient manuscripts, and found a neglected text in the corner of a black book covered in spiders. Every heir born into this lineage is born with an invisible seal. This seal binds their soul to the world of shadows, making it a door that will open when their time comes. As I read that sentence, my entire body froze. The door I had seen in the dream was not a dream. It was one of those doors mentioned in the scrolls. And I was just beginning. Since that night, I was no longer sure if I was living my own life, or if I was merely an instrument of an eternal force greater than myself. Everything seemed alive, every shadow followed me, and every whisper in the room reminded me that I was not alone. One thing was clear, I was no longer Rook the human, but Rook the sealed, heir to a world that knew no mercy, and the voice of the demons had become part of my very breath, pulsing with me every moment. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my bed in the dark, hearing every whisper and every movement throughout the house. It was as if the walls themselves were watching me, and the air had become too heavy to breathe easily. I closed my eyes several times, but the images that clung to my mind never left me, the faces of the demons, their voices, and the dark covenants I'd inherited against my will. With the first light of dawn, I sat down at the old wooden table I'd inherited from my father. I laid out all the books and manuscripts I'd collected from his room on it, then began reading voraciously, like someone searching for a drop of water in a desert. Each page held a deeper secret than the last, talismans, covenants written in black blood, and the names of demons I'd never heard of before. But what truly terrified me was that many of these pages weren't in my father's handwriting, but in my own. My blood froze. How could this be? When had I written these words? When had I performed these rituals? Had I been a tool in the hands of the demons since childhood without even knowing it? Were they moving me like puppets with strings? I lifted my head to see the small mirror hanging on the opposite wall, revealing a strange reflection. I didn't see myself as I knew myself, but a different face, pale, with eyes glowing like embers, and a mouth smiling a sly smile I'd never learned. I moved closer, but the closer I got, the clearer the face became, until I heard a whisper coming from the glass itself. "You're just the beginning, the lineage isn't over yet." I screamed with all my might and slammed my fist into the mirror. The glass shattered around the room, but the sound didn't stop. It turned into intermittent laughter, as if it were coming from every corner around me. I covered my ears with my hands, but the laughter grew louder, piercing my head and gnawing at my mind. I couldn't stand it any longer, so I quickly left the house, searching for fresh air to extinguish the fire burning inside me. But the streets were unusually empty, and the sky was overcast with black clouds, even though the day had just begun. Everything whispered to me, "You won't escape. Wherever you go, we are with you." I stood at the edge of the nearby forest, where I had played as a child, and remembered how my father had always warned me not to enter it. But now I was no longer that naive child, I was the heir of darkness, whether I liked it or not. I entered the forest with hesitant steps, a strange feeling within me that I was walking toward my inevitable destiny. There, amidst the tall trees and dancing shadows, I found a circle of ancient stones, engraved with symbols I knew well. I sat in their center, feeling as though I had returned to a place I had belonged to long ago. Suddenly, a strong wind rose, and the fog gathered around me until I could no longer see anything. From the mist emerged dark shapes, dancing along the edges of the circle, approaching and then receding, all whispering my name. Rock. Rock. Our heir. Our coming Lord. It was then that I realized I was no longer in the position of choosing. Rather, I am part of a game bigger than myself, a game that began long before I was born. And everything I've seen so far has been only the beginning of what lies ahead. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath my feet, and I heard heavy footsteps approaching from the shadows. They were approaching at a rapid pace, without any source I could see. A cold wind crept into my chest, as if it wanted to freeze my heart before something stronger could reach me. Small creatures appeared before me, their eyes bloodshot, their voices like the creaking of metal. They spoke in a language no one understood, yet I felt the meaning reach directly into my heart. "You are the only one who can break the covenant," or be tyrannized forever. I trembled, but inside me, a small flame of rebellion remained unquenched. I realized that the path to salvation would not be easy, and that every step I took now would be a direct confrontation with the darkness that had inhabited me since birth. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and said to myself, I will not allow them to complete what my ancestors started. Even if the path to salvation is drenched in blood, I will walk it to the end. When I opened my eyes, the fog had lifted slightly, and the symbols on the stones glowed a faint red, as if awaiting my next step. For the first time, I felt that I had some control over this world that had always wanted to swallow me up. I thought I'd reached the deepest level of my family's dark secrets, but I was wrong. One night, when it was quiet, I sat in my grandfather's room, rummaging through his old books. The smell of burnt paper mixed with the worn dust made me feel as if I were opening a graveyard of memories. As I turned the pages, my eyes fell on a small notebook, covered in dark leather dotted with strange inscriptions. It was unlike any book I had ever read. I tremblingly opened it, to find words written in a sinuous, bloody script. The words were like incantations, but they weren't just static lines. They seemed to come alive, writhing between the letters as if the demons themselves lived among them. I read the first sentence, and a whisper rang in my ear. Finally, you found our way. My blood froze. I quickly closed the notebook, but the whisper wouldn't stop. It echoed inside me, urging me not to open any more. I tried to resist it, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it again and discovered that this notebook had not only belonged to my grandfather, but was also the covenant the family had made with the demons hundreds of years ago. I read the details of the agreement, that every member of the lineage would be a servant of the demons, supplying them with human energy through evil deeds in exchange for power, money, and protection. Each generation added their own blood to the covenant to keep it renewed, as if the family was forever indebted to them. The facts gradually became clear to me. My father had not chosen the path of magic voluntarily, and my grandfather had not practiced it out of love. Rather, they were prisoners of this covenant, victims of a merciless grip. Yet, they pretended to be powerful, as if they were in control. I stood in front of the mirror, examining myself, wondering, am I, too, just a link in this cursed chain? Will I be the next servant, or the rebel who will break the chain? But my mind didn't allow me to think for long, as I began to hear voices in the room. They weren't human voices, but deep hisses rising from the walls. I felt it caressing my ear and then moving through my body. You're ours, whether you like it or not. I shivered. A harsh chill enveloped my neck, as if an invisible hand were pressing down on me. I tried to run away, but my feet were glued to the ground. I saw nothing, yet I felt their presence, surrounding me from all sides, watched by invisible eyes, their voices shaking me until I could hear my heartbeat echoing with their murmurs. Leave me alone, I cried. Another, harsher voice came, sounding as if it came from deep within the earth. You will not continue your life as you wish. You are the heir to the throne. My soul trembled, and images of my father and grandfather began to flash before my eyes, as if they were watching me from another world, giving me signs, warning me, and at the same time trying to free me from this dark prison. Only then did I realize that everything I had discovered was only the beginning. And that the path I had chosen, the path of repentance and liberation, would not just be a battle with myself, but with forces that feed on my blood and claim me as their own. I walked out of the room, carrying the notebook in my hand, knowing that these pages would be the key to my true struggle. It was no longer just a matter of exposing family secrets, but of confronting the demons themselves, and confronting the destiny that had dogged me since birth. Suddenly, I felt a cool breeze envelop my body from the outside. It was as if the room itself was breathing, contracting, and expanding, whispering my name once more. Rock, we are waiting for you, you will not flee, and you will not choose, we choose. But inside me, a small flame of rebellion had not yet been extinguished. I knew that this fire alone would determine whether I would surrender to the cursed contract, or stand up against the darkness, even if the price was my blood and my entire being. Little did I know that my first steps on this dark path would open doors I had never even imagined existed. I thought I had reached the furthest reaches of knowledge about the demonic world, and that I no longer needed any more secrets or rituals. But I discovered that every secret revealed was only a prelude to another, deeper and more terrifying one. That cold night, I sat in the basement of the dark house, a place I had always avoided as a child. Its damp walls and the stench of mold mixed with ancient smoke made me feel as if I were in the bowels of a forgotten tomb. In front of me lay dilapidated wooden boxes containing notebooks and papers my father had left behind before his passing. I reviewed his talismans and drawings filled with mysterious symbols, searching for a thread that would connect me to his truth. As I leafed through the yellowed, worn pages, I found a single, distinctive piece of paper, written in black ink that had not faded despite the passage of time. It contained only a short sentence, but it shook me to my core. Whoever holds the blood of the family holds the keys to the underworld. My breath stopped for a moment, and my hands trembled until the paper fell from my fingers. What did this phrase mean? Did our blood hold an eternal secret that made us special from the rest of humanity? Were we just ordinary magicians, or were we connected to something greater and more dangerous? The shock drove me to dig deeper. I was no longer searching out of curiosity, but out of a desire to survive. Behind a crumbling wall, I discovered another notebook that my father had carefully hidden. It was covered in a layer of dust, as if he wanted it to remain forgotten. I slowly opened it, and inside, I found strange drawings of enormous stone gates, surrounded by symbols I had never seen before. In the margins were clear references to bloody rituals used to open these gates, requiring the sacrifice of a closest blood relative, meaning a family member. At that moment, I felt the earth spin beneath me. I was no longer just a son in a strange family, but an heir to an ancient covenant, a covenant made hundreds of years ago that made our blood the key to unlocking what should never be unlocked. As I immersed myself in the pages of the notebook, a faint whisper crept into my ear. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but the words were clear enough to make my heart pound. You are the chosen one. Your blood is the key. I gasped and threw the notebook to the floor. I grabbed an oil lamp to light the place, but the shadows in the corners of the cellar seemed to be moving, undulating, approaching. There was no one there, yet I felt a cold breath on my neck, and another voice whispering behind me. You will not escape your legacy. You are the heir to the covenant. I was about to go crazy. I wanted to run from the cellar, but my feet were stuck to the floor as if an invisible force was holding me back. I shouted with all my might, "Leave me!" But my response came with terrifying calm. If you try to escape, the doors will be opened with your blood, whether you want them to or not. I retraced my steps with difficulty until I found myself outside the basement, breathing like someone who had just drowned. In my hand, the notebook was still clinging to me, as if it didn't want to let go. From that night on, it wasn't just about exposing family secrets, or about rejecting a dark legacy. I realized I was at the center of a game far bigger than I had ever imagined. My father, my grandfather, and all my ancestors were merely pawns on the underworld's chessboard. Now it was my turn to be the next pawn, or the hand that turned the entire table. But the question that haunted me relentlessly was, do I have the courage to face this fate? Or am I, despite all my efforts, just another tool that will complete the cursed cycle of blood?